I'm Trish, and this is Sherri, and we are the hosts of Found Podcasts with Trish and Sherri. Our podcast is about all things adoption, adoptees, DNA related type things. And in this episode, we are going to delve into Sherri's life and her journey growing up as an adopted person and finding her biological family at 48 years old and the wild ride that came after that. Just want to preface saying that this and every other podcast, we are talking about only our experiences. And in no way are we saying that our experience, thoughts, and feelings are that of any other adoptee, adopted parent, or birth parents, but are only experienced by the two of us. Hi, Sherri.
Hi, Trish. Hi, everyone.
Sherri is a music teacher for high school. Please send her a little extra prayers for that. She is a mom of 4 and lives in Central Florida with her husband and a ton of critters and love, and her house is always open to people, critters, experiences, and all kinds of fun things. So, hi again.
Hi again.
I would like to start off and ask you about what time period you were born and what were the details regarding your coming to be you.
Okay. So I was born here in Central Florida in 1969. And that was before Roe v. Wade, which I think is significant when we're talking about adoptions from the time period Trish and I were born. Trish and I are childhood best friends. We relocated to the town where she lives when I was 2. And that's how we met in church. And we've been friends ever since. So the story about my birth is that my adopted parents had a son and a daughter. And then dad had a vasectomy and mom had a hysterectomy. So there were going to be no more children because they were happy with the son and the daughter. But when their son got to be 8 years old, he was diagnosed with leukemia. And for 2 years, they struggled with that diagnosis and struggled hoping he would recover. And during that time period, my dad took their son to my dad's general practitioner, his GP, to get a second opinion on his diagnosis.
Yeah.
And so that doctor became aware of what was going on in my parents' life and that their son was struggling with, back then, an incurable disease. So when he was 10 years old, their son passed away. And that left my sister, who at that point was 8 years old, with my parents in the household. And the doctor, my dad's GP, knew that their son had passed and contacted my parents and asked if they'd be interested in adopting a baby because he knew someone whose teenage daughter was pregnant and was going to be putting that child up for adoption.
And now, they said yes.
They said yes. Lucky me.
Lucky me.
And shortly before that, actually, I learned later in life, they had applied for the Children's Home Society to adopt as well. And right after I was born, they got a call that a baby boy was born. Did they want to adopt him? That would have been a lot. And so they declined that. And that kid missed out on a wonderful, wonderful family and a wonderful life. But I'm not sad to say I claimed that because they were good for me. So when I was 2 years old, we moved to North Florida where Trish lives. And like I said, we met at church. And then when I was a little bit older in elementary school, I think I was in 2nd grade, we adopted my brother out of an adoption agency. And he had already been through some failed foster situations and even some failed adoptions. And he is a year older than I am. So he had a lot coming into our family to deal with that really upturned the whole household and changed the way everything worked. Anyway, so Trish and I have discussed how there were a lot of adopted kids from different types of adoption in the small town where we were born.
Yes, especially around our age group.
Right. And I'm not sure if that was everywhere or if that's just where we were.
I don't know.
But we even had a really good friend of ours back when we were 2 and 3, whose mother remarried and her new husband adopted him. And we specifically remember his name changing from one last name to the next last name. And that was impactful to us, even at such a young age. And then they later adopted a daughter. And so adoption was everywhere.
And
Adoption was
tell,
everywhere.
and tell the little secret about what we found out later about that daughter.
That daughter actually has family in Trish's family tree, which is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, we'll
Absolutely
talk about
crazy.
that in another episode, but it
That's
was
another
mind
episode.
blowing that the
Yes.
routes that we took were states and states apart and ended up living 2 blocks from each other.
Right.
And
Well,
not
and
discovering
Trish
it.
wasn't even born. Neither one of them were born in the town where we lived.
Correct.
And they met again through church when we were young. And then when we were finding our biological families, they found out that they shared people in common as well, which was crazy. Anyway, so I didn't think a lot about being adopted growing up. I did, well, okay, so in a way I did, because everything my parents told me, everything I did was special because it was me. Sherri's musical, Sherri's artistic, Sherri's this, Sherri's that. I also really longed to be like them, longed to look at the family pictures or the cousins at the get-togethers and to be like them and claim those same ancestors and that same history. I didn't know what my countries of origin were. I didn't see a non-identifying birth information until we started looking for my biological family when I was 48. So it was really a big guess, where do I come from? I had another good friend, and when we helped him and when he went through finding his biological family, he said, it's like floating around in space and just finally being able to pin yourself down. This is where I came from. And I always knew I wanted to find them, but I didn't know how to find them.
Well,
But
when we did look a few times, you'd stop and start because we didn't have the internet tools, we didn't
Right.
have the DNA tools, and it was expensive.
Very much so.
Hire a private investigator,
Yes.
track it down, go through an adoption agency, and I remember it being just a lot of money.
And even then, we were told that you could get all the way to finding somebody, and if they told that attorney or that lawyer or whoever it was, that private detective, that they didn't want to be notified, that we'd just be out, that we would never know. And that was pretty wild. But then I was teaching at a school and struck up a conversation with one of the lunch ladies. And she was telling me how she had used a local group to help find her biological daughter because she was a birth mom, and what an amazing that experience was. And right about the same time, Trish was writing adoption-related books because she was adopted. She's a writer. And she also adopted her daughter from China in 2009. 2008. And
that's right, 2009. Never mind. Yes, you're correct. I'm wrong. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm reading from the notes you wrote.
I know that was right.
There we go. Of course I'm right. So, so Trish was like writing these books and living these experiences, and we were sharing them and talking about them and talking about her daughter's birth mother and talking about how she felt as an adopted mother and what did our mothers go through. And all of a sudden it was hitting me again. I'm going to search. I'm going to find them. I didn't know how until somewhere around 2015. I was on Facebook and I saw 2 other people, separate people on Facebook, explaining how one of them had found his birth mother and another one had a daughter they didn't know about contact her father. And it was all through ancestry kits. And I was like, I can do that. And so when the next Christmas rolled around, I bought myself an ancestry kit and put it in early so that my results didn't get mixed up with everybody else who tested Christmas morning. And it took about 2 months, I think, for the results to hit.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I did was I looked at it. I said, I'm German Irish. And I bought a shirt that said, "Kiss me, I'm Irish." And stuck myself on that map. And that, and ran and told my family, guess what? Even my students at school had been guessing, what my genetic makeup was. And it was wild and fun. But then the reality hit. Okay, the closest match I have is a second cousin. What do I do with that? Like, and Trish and I still sometimes have to get a little chart out to count down first cousin, second cousin, first, once removed, twice removed. Like, it gets really wild.
Well, we had to learn that whole new language too. All the whatever the genetic, you'd probably know the language better than I would at this point, but all the things you had to hook up and we had to figure out to understand what we were even looking at.
So I was Googling and I was like, how to find your biological family with ancestry results. And it said, upload your results to GEDmatch, GEDmatch.com. And what that place does is compares your DNA results with people who did other kits like 23andMe and whatever the other big ones are. And then that was fun for just a minute. And then it's getting to be about February at this time. Mm-hmm. And I sit down and it's probably like a Friday night and I pull up the results and it's like Greek. It's, mom's side, dad's side, and centigrams
or something. Yeah.
Cinnamon rolls. I don't know. And so it was so upsetting. I literally sat there and cried. I was like, I don't even know what to do with this. This was supposed to finally be the answer. After 48 years, I'm going to do it. And now what? And so Trish and I belonged to 2 groups on Facebook, and one of them really actually helps people only after loved ones have passed. And then the other one helps, like us, adopted people and biological connections with DNA results find their families. And so amazingly, after I posted, I got a private message from what they call a DNA detective in Australia. And these people, they're called search angels on the other side. These people are literally search angels because this person was in Australia. It actually only took her 9 days.
And they're volunteers. They're not paid. They do this for fun.
Right. And I asked her at one point, why do you do this? Why do you give so much of your time? And she said that her brother-in-law had been a foundling and that she started doing this to help him find his biological family. And at that point, they had never found them. But it was wild because, they're on the opposite time schedule. So Trish and I would be getting in bed and I'd roll over and I'd see a message from her and it'd be like, what were the results on that? Or, put me in your family tree or something, which would just start a whole
found this, found that. Yeah.
Yep. Whole slew of middle of the night, waking up, getting on the computer, searching for information, sharing it with her. And then of course, when we were getting up and starting our days, she was in bed. And I felt like this person's giving up their time. So I better answer them quick. So for 9 days, I really didn't sleep.
Neither one of us slept for 9 days.
Right. A lot of obituaries, a lot of, newspaper articles, old yearbooks. That's where you say your part, Trish, about be careful what you put on the internet.
Well, yes, that is my big thing. You do need to be careful because there is so much about us on the internet that we have no control over. And even keeping your social medias open and things, it is amazing how easy it is to find everybody that you're related to just by poking around. Now, there some caution that can go down roads that you don't intend to. And we'll talk about that in other episodes, but it was amazing how many obituaries, military records, marriage records, divorce records, just everything, even photos. We found lots of pictures of people and things like that.
Mhm.
So it is really both wonderful for search purposes, but a little scary otherwise. That
Eye-opening.
it is eye opening how much you can
Yes.
find about somebody.
My favorite part was when we were finding census papers and documents and articles, and every single one of them would have handwritten, what the name was, where they were from, what their birthday was, and if they had passed, what was the cause of death. And they were beautifully written, kept records, which were really, and I love history, really so historical and beautiful. That was my favorite part of searching.
And some readable and legible, and some questionable.
They died of what? And even lost in the years of translation, they would call it consumption. And I'd be like, well, what exactly is consumption? Or whatever is. Anyway, so also you'd wake up and you'd log back onto your Ancestry and it'd be like, you have a hint. I actually still do that sometimes. And it's always exciting to have a hint or a private message.
I still do it a few times a year too.
Yes. I get the emails. You have a hint.
Yes.
So we started getting closer, and the DNA detective had kind of focused in on this one family, and they're from where I live here in Central Florida, but they were appearing to be in Texas. And there were 3 sisters in Texas, and one had a picture with a monkey, and one had a picture with an assault weapon, and the other one just had a picture with a guitar, actually. And, you're looking at the faces, and I'm going, what do you think, Trish? Do you think I look like them? Do you think they look like me? What do you think? What do you think? And
yes.
So I'm going back and forth to Facebook, and, we're stalking them pretty heavy on Facebook because that's what we did. We stalked a lot. And I'm like, oh, look, they have a cousin here where I live. We have a mutual Facebook friend who's a bestie of mine. And they worked at the same high school here where I live. And I messaged her, private messaged her on Facebook, and just, something bland,
Very carefully worded.
Yeah, we have a mutual connection. Mm-hmm. And I messaged my bestie and said, hey, who is this person? And was kind of thinking she was the cousin. And all of a sudden, I get a message from the DNA detective, and she says, wait a minute, that's a sister. And according to how old she was when you were born, that's your mother. And the world stopped. The world stopped. And I was at work stalking her Facebook page, and she would do things with vinyl. And I noticed that she had made herself a shirt with 7 children's names. Like she had 7 children. And I broke down and cried, and said, why didn't she keep me? She had 7 kids. Why not an 8th? Like, why not keep me? And it was very raw and very unexpected.
But I think there's a very common feeling that if you've kept your other children, how come you couldn't make room for me? Mm-hmm. And I think that goes back to not an adult decision, because we know teenagers, sometimes have kids and all that, but that primal, that really base child wanting to know, where is my mommy?
Right. There's a book called The Primal Wound.
Yes.
From a while ago, where they talk about all adoptees have a primal wound. I didn't feel like that because I had everything growing up. My parents' son had passed, and as my sister explains it, because she's 8 years older than I am, she said things were dark. We were unhappy. And she said, when they brought you home, it was like light in the house and happiness and excitement. And mom, everybody was happy again.
New life.
And so Yes, new life in the house. And my mother had told me when I was younger, we saw a woman who was pregnant. I said, "What's going on with her belly?" And she said, "Oh, she's got a baby in there." And I said, "Did I grow in your belly?" And she said, "No, you were adopted." And I think the story we all get is your teenage mother gave you up because she couldn't provide for you and she knew we could. We're learning that that's not always the case. They didn't always want to give us up. Um, and my dad would say, when people have a baby, they get who they get stuck with whoever, and we picked you. We picked you.
Chosen
And that
child.
chosen child. And I was raised as the chosen child. Everything I did was fabulous. So,
Well, it was. You were
I'm grateful.
stylish and musical and beautiful and always had the bestest taste. And yeah, you were fun. So, yes, you were.
Okay. Thank you. You're so sweet. And so, fast forward. So, Trish and I now know we found my biological mother. So, I start wording an email, and Trish reaches out.
To make sure that I wanted to make sure that she was at least semi nice before you went after her. So I made a
Went
little
after her.
store just to make sure that she sounded okay, and because I didn't want you to get hurt, and I didn't, I just didn't, and how much I could learn from that I don't know, but I just felt like, well, it would give one more layer of protection to how this would go, give us a little bit of heads up. And she was wonderful. She was very sweet and very easy to talk to, and very creative and helpful about what she could do. And so I put in a little order, and then you had found where she lived.
So I found where she lived, and I told Trish, I'm driving by her house, and I've got my daughter in the back seat, and I'm in the minivan, and I'm like, Trish is on speakerphone. Trish, I'm driving by. And Trish is like, wait, what? And she's telling me how she ordered from my birth mom, and it's saying, what if she's in the yard? What if she's out watering plants? And I was like, I'm driving by. And I did, and she wasn't outside. But then we started carefully wording the email.
Yes.
And I think for everyone who's searching and making that first connection, and I think we learned this mostly through the Facebook groups, but, and I know as an educator, the first reaction you're normally going to get from people is no. And not only do we not want to shock and just dump on them, we need to be protected. I needed to be protected from being rejected.
Well, and you also don't want to necessarily blow up somebody's life out of the middle of nowhere, not knowing who's going to get the email, or maybe she has an assistant, and we didn't
Right.
want to just, hi, here we are, if it was going to cause, major issues in their life. We neither one of us was looking to get anything per se, or to make things more difficult for them.
Right. Right. And those are important points as you hear the rest of our stories unraveling here. Or coming together, not unraveling. And so we worded an email and said something along the lines of, I did an ancestry kit, and that your maiden name came up as a match, and I think we're related. I
Would
don't.
you mind talking to me, or something
Yeah,
like
would
this?
you mind talking to me? Right. And so, as usual, most of the conversations happened when I left work and was going to pick up my daughter, and Trish was leaving home to go pick up her daughter. And so I was driving to work, driving to pick up my daughter, and my phone dinged, and I had an email, and it was a reply, like almost immediately. It was very nicely written, but basically she said, my father left our home when I was very young. I don't know that much about that side of the family. I'd be more than happy to talk to you. Um, And so I called Trish and I was like, well, this is what she said. And Trish was like, that's her, that's her. And I was like, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know.
She
And then
answered
like,
the same tone we had written, and I thought that
right,
was very smart on her part. It's like, "Are you okay? Here's a little step."
right,
Okay, and I
yep,
thought, "Oh, that's good," because it wasn't just like, "Sure."
right,
Very careful in her answer back too, which I thought was good.
right. And so then maybe 30 seconds later, there was a
Yeah.
second email that said, by the way, is this your birthday? And she had listed out my birthday. And I said, yes, yes, that is my birthday. And she said, I think I'm your biological mom. So I was like, can I call you? And she's like, yes, we're emailing. I'm pulling off to the side of the road. And so I get
And we'll
home.
leave out that you had the shakes and cries.
So we get home. My husband was a medic on the ambulance at that time. So I'm walking in the door and he's walking out the door. So of course I'm talking to Trish, and I came in and called her, and she answered the phone and said, "I'm your mother," and that was it.
The
And
world changed.
the world changed, and there I was. I was not only on the map, Kiss Me, I'm Irish, but I had a person, and I actually had a person who responded quickly, who said, I've been waiting for this day. I've always wanted to talk to you. I've been praying for you since before you were born. Can we meet tomorrow? Which was the day I found her was Valentine's Day. And so, can we meet tomorrow? And so I teach high school, and my team offered to split up my afternoon classes so I could leave and go meet my biological mom. And I took her flowers. My husband went with me, and we walked in, and immediately I was looking for myself in her and for her in myself, looking at her hands, looking at her eyes. She has gorgeous blue eyes. I ended up with hazel, but that's okay. And she immediately broke down because I looked like her little sister who she had lost contact with. And
Which you do look so much like her.
yes, yes, yes. And their mother. I look a lot like their mother.
You do.
So those tears were the first tears of probably a year of her crying. Every time we would meet, she would cry, and she would basically say, I can't believe you're not mad at me. I can't believe you want to meet me. And that had never occurred to me to be mad at her, because here was somebody, at this point, I was a mother of 4. I can't imagine what it took to carry your child for 9 months and deliver them. And turns out she never even got to see me or hold me. They just took me away. And then she went home, and her mom was a single mom raising 5 teenager middle schoolers, working nights, no support, no husband, and just basically told my birth mom, quit crying, get over it, it's done. And I can't even fathom what that could have possibly been like for an 18-year-old.
Well, and your father had gone to the military at that time too, right? So she'd lost both her baby and her person.
Right. So according to her, she didn't want to give me up for adoption. So already the story contradicted what I've been told. And he was in the military and stationed here. And then he was stationed in Iceland. And when she found out she was pregnant, and so she was communicating with him. So he knew I existed. Mm-hmm. And at that point, the story, I'm not really sure exactly what happened. It doesn't really matter.
But they lost touch.
Yes, they lost touch. And he knew that I was born, and that was it. And turns out her mother was the medical assistant in my dad's doctor's office who arranged the adoption. So
your adopted dad.
My adopted dad
right.
took his son for a second opinion to his general practitioner, and Bobby passed. And the doctor said, would you be interested in adopting? Because it was his medical assistant, my maternal grandmother, whose daughter was pregnant. So everything was arranged. They said that my mom looked a lot like my birth mom, and that would make things easier for them, which I guess is another thing that was told and said in the late 1960s.
Well, what about finding your bio dad?
So with my bio mom came, she had me. I was up for adoption. Then she got married and had my brother Chris.
Right.
That marriage ended, and she got remarried to my stepdad now. And they were told that they couldn't have any more children. So they adopted 3 siblings out of foster care.
Right.
And then, surprise, got pregnant with one of my brothers and then had 3 more kids.
Which has been known to happen.
Yes. So on that side, I'm the oldest of 8.
Right.
And honestly, I think a lot of what our book was about and what I would expect is going to unfold in this podcast was the beginning of trying to make relationships in history with people that I had a biological connection to, but no history with. I had somebody else say
family, but is still family and still important, but no background.
Right. So I was in the midst of this, and Trish and I were like, I wasn't sure how I felt about finding my biological father at that point, because it was already taking so much out of me to meld with these new.
You didn't find one people, you found a huge family.
Right. And we did, once she told us his name, we did look that name up and found a man who matched it. The military record, the timeline, being stationed where I was born, all of it. And we found him on social media, and honestly, we're about to pull the trigger and call him.
You had the same color hair. You had enough looking alike, even that it was not impossible.
But the DNA detective said, I don't see it. I don't see the DNA. I don't see the match. And we were cautious, which is, thank God, because we could have blown that man's world up for no reason. And so I backburnered it. And I was ready for Trish to take up her search. That was a whole full-time job. And so one day I'm laying in bed next to my daughter in her room, and I get an email from someone saying, I found your birth dad. The DNA matches. Here's who he is. Name matches. Here's where he's at, which is close to where he was from. Here's his senior football pictures. Here's pictures of his 2 daughters who turn out to be my sisters. And so,
and the announcements in the paper about him going to war.
Yes. And all of it lined up. So now we have him without really searching. It's kind of handed to us. So again, we cautiously email him because all we have is that he owns a business. And so through the business email, again, cautiously, I say, I think you might know somebody I'm related to. You were stationed here. This is her name. Is it possible? I didn't say anything about him being my dad. I just said, I'd like to talk to you more. Immediately, I get an email back saying, oh my God, I've wondered what happened to you. I've thought about you all these years, but please don't contact my family. Let's keep this between us and email. And so I was like, so excited. And by both birth parents, I've been accepted, which was my biggest fear, was either they were dead or I was too late finding them, or that they would reject me or say horrible things or I don't know, all those unrational.
Scary.
Yes. I'm always expecting the worst and hoping for the best. And so we start this emailing, and it was several times a day, and then it started to fade out a little bit. And so for a year and a half, we emailed with him always saying, if you contact my family, the wheels are going to fall off this whole thing. Don't contact my family. And after a year and a half, there really wasn't much more to say. Um,
Well, he
and
didn't
Trish,
really want to have a relationship, just trading
yep,
information back and
we never
forth.
talked, we never met. It was strictly email. And Trish and I had been writing the book, and we're coming to the close of writing the book. And I said, I'm not writing this book. I'm not finishing this until I contact my sisters. And I did. I hit both of them up through a private message, and now that I knew it was him, just said, "Hey, I'm your sister, and I'd like to have contact." One of them never replied, and still haven't spoken with her to this day, but the other one immediately replied, and we made plans to talk, and have had a fabulous relationship for several years now. And she's met Trish, and I have visited her, and she has visited me, and I adore her. She's actually going to come on a future episode, and she actually has another interesting story of a DNA connection that's not adopted related that I hope she'll tell. But it's not another sibling. It's some other story.
What do you think was the hardest part of all this?
The hardest part?
Yeah. What's been the hardest part?
Making the relationships.
After.
After. My parents always encouraged me to find my biological family. That was a gift. After I found my biological mom, my mom and my sister came down, and my mom and my sister and my biological mom and I all sat down and had dinner, and thanked each other and explained what their situations were like. And that was maybe one of the highlights of my life, was to sit there and have the two women who loved me the most and gave me the most sit there and share my story, and honestly made me the center of the conversation, and made me feel so wanted and accepted and loved. That was really great. That was amazing. But yes, but I always imagined I would find a tree hugging hippie because of my personality. Now, my birth mom and I do have very similar personalities, but tree hugging hippie she is not. And she's agreed to come on a future episode as well. So I think establishing and maintaining relationships, and not only that, the history now that we've made over the last 8 years. Another highlight of my journey was when my brother got married. And he and his wife, when I walked into the church, they invited me.
Which brother?
Denver.
No, so your brother, not your adopted brother.
No,
your birth brother.
My biological brother got married, and he and his wife invited me. And so I walked to the church and was immediately escorted to sit with the family. And I was like, oh, this is nice, acceptance. And the Christmases and the Thanksgivings, there was never a time when I didn't feel welcomed with my birth mom's family. Birth dad, whole nother story. I found out that when he did finally, the sisters already knew at this point, when he finally goes to tell them what's happened, he says, no, they didn't know at that point. He sits down and he says, I did something horrible. And my sister that I speak with said, she was like, did he hit somebody with the car? Like, what has happened? And then he said, I had a daughter out of wedlock before I met your mother. And she was like, what? That's not that big of a deal. But to him,
generational change, huge.
He had done something horrible. That's me.
And don't you think that kind of goes into the generational thoughts on being adopted and all that type of thing that we've found on my side as well has been very different than how we grew up and subsequent generations. It's not such a shame. It's not such a big deal. People are much more open about it, which is a
Right.
good thing, because I say, really, now that DNA testing is so easy, and I mean, for $59 and a little spit, you can find out just about anything. If you've got a
Yes.
third cousin, you can figure out. So
Right.
really, there's no secrets anymore. If you want to find out, you can.
But that generation, they never dreamed that we were coming.
But we were
They were,
closed adoption. We weren't ever
yep.
supposed to be um,
Yeah.
found.
And there were never going to be ancestry kits and DNAs and reunions and TV shows about it. And here we were. And everything they had been told and lived under for 48 years was just exploding, and they couldn't control it. At first, Trish and I thought, what's the big deal? He had sex before he got married. But he had never told his wife and never told the girls until he absolutely had to.
Yeah.
And
Probably a cultural thing too, with the
right. But at first we thought, why can't the wife accept this? And we were like that for a year and a half until I actually met my biological sister on that side. And she explained some of the way it had actually unfolded was more of him sneaking off to read an email. And then, his wife, I think, thought he was having an affair, and she left. And like, there was a whole bunch of stuff going on that explains exactly why she acted like she did.
It does, but that also brings up in my mind the thought of that it is when the doc from the whole time we were growing up was oh my God, what if we or end up dating a brother or something like that, or
Yes.
you like somebody and then it turns out to be your dad or something. And it's
Yep.
just like, oh my God, such a deep rooted fear.
But when
Knowing
I said that to my biological mother, she was like, that never occurred to me. Because my next brother is just a little bit younger. He's actually my husband's age, I think. And we were in the same clubs and like the same music and doing the same things.
well, you didn't know
That
you lived 3 miles from each other for 20
Oh, I
years
don't think we
either.
said that. I
Yeah.
don't think I said that, did
Yeah.
I?
No, you didn't.
So
There's a whole lot of more detail in the book, but that was
yes,
one of the things. It's like,
that was
oh
wild.
no, did you?
I literally drive by her street going to work every day. It's crazy.
And
It's
we wondered how
crazy.
many times, because were so close to each other, had
Mhm.
friends in common. Your kids had friends in common. You were, you. What was the real? How many times had you run into each other over the years and not have any idea of who you were? But we have one that you have proof of,
This is
right?
actually my favorite story.
Me
This is
too.
my favorite story. So I met her, I met my biological mom when I was 48. And she is literally a clown. Face paint, wig, shoes, clown. And my biological dad is a Christmas tree farmer. So I was like, this is actually making a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, I
Anyway,
think it explained a whole lot about you. That's for sure.
he was also a retired teacher, but there's that.
Yes.
Anyway, so that's when I found her at 48. 2 years later, I'm turning 50, and I plan my 50th birthday party because that's what I do. And it was Sherri's 50 favorite things. And one of the things I love are pictures. And so I was going to print out 50 of my favorite pictures to display around the yard so that when people came, they could see these pictures from my life. So I was at work scrolling through pictures, and I have a class full of kids, and I'm going through my Shutterfly account, and I scroll down and I see a picture of my son getting his face painted by a clown. And I was like, what are the odds? And then I was like, that doesn't look like her. And I scrolled on past. And then I scroll back and look at the face, and I was like, no, that's not her. I scroll on down. Then I was like, wait, she had a name tag on. And I scroll back up, and her name tag said Petey. And that's her clown name, Petey the Clown. And I zoomed in. Unbelievable. So 11 years before I met her, we were at a buddy walk at Lake Eola, and she was face painting my son's face. And he
Well,
was
you
like
stood there
probably
talking to her.
Yeah, because he was like 4 years old. So, you're like, nice weather. How are you? What's going on? Like, I'm talking to her. She's touching her grandson's face. And
No
part of me
idea.
is like, yeah, part of me is like, wouldn't you know? Like, wouldn't you just innately know? No, no. But it reaffirms to me, this is just one of my beliefs, that things happen when they're supposed to. Because at that time in my life, my daughter has Down syndrome. She was 2. She was in therapy like 10 times a week. And I had Ethan was 4, and I had 2 teenagers at home. And if you've ever had teenagers at home, you know what I'm talking about. My life was full. I didn't have the time to make these relationships that I'm still making now and to make the history. My other favorite moment that has happened since this was 2 years ago. My brother, the same one who got married, and his wife had a baby, and that baby never will know that I wasn't always just Aunt Sherry, part of the family. And when he was born, I would go over and help them several times a week. I just went to his second birthday party. That little biological connection, that nibbling, will never know that I wasn't there. He doesn't know the difference.
It'll
And
just be a story in the past to him. It won't be
yeah,
as immediate as everybody else. You'll just be part
yeah.
of the family.
It'll be like 2 truths and a lie. Auntie Sherry was adopted. She didn't like it'll be he'll be like, "Oh, that's not real. She was
That's
always here."
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well,
so
anything else that you want to wrap up with? Because we are definitely running out of time.
right. Um, no, I think as we continue, I'm so excited to hear other people's stories. We have a lot of exciting interviews coming, a lot of people from lots of different perspectives, not just adoption related, coming up. And in our next episode, we're
We'll be
going to be
talking about
talking about Trish and her experience and her life growing up as not only an adopted person, but an adopted mother. And you're going to find out that Trish's stories of finding her biological mother and who her father was completely different than my 2. So we had 4 biological parents. We've had 4 different experiences. In the next episode, we'll be talking about Trish and her experiences.
Absolutely. Well, I enjoyed this. I hope you did.
I did. It's always fun to walk through this. Makes me want to go read the book and remember the history again.
It probably might be a really good idea for both of us before we start talking to people again. So
Right,
I am assigning your homework, Teach.
right. Do that. I also Amazon's going to bring me The Girls They Left Behind, I think is the name of it, about biological mothers from our time period and their experiences. I'm excited to start that. Trish and I are going to book club it a chapter at a time. So for now, thank you for joining us on this episode of Found with Trish and Sherri, the podcast. Please like and subscribe. I'm sure it's down there somewhere so you never miss an episode. If you have a related story that you'd like to share with us, please send us an email at foundwithtrishandsherri@gmail.com. You could be part of an upcoming episode. If you'd like to know more about the stories that inspired this podcast, check out our book, Found Adopted Friends Search for Their Birth Families, available on Amazon. The link is in YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Music, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. So until next time, this is Sherri.
That's Trish. Have a good night, day, whatever you have.